Hi Cake, it's Thursday, and I am flying home tonight as my parents called me this morning and they were like, hey Rosie, good morning, you should come home this weekend. I was a little bit disoriented and confused as to why they suddenly wanted me home because I called like 2 weeks ago and I was like, hey, I need to book a flight if you want me to come home this weekend, which was this weekend, not that weekend. And they were like, no, it won't be worth the hassle. But this morning at 6 a.m., they were like, you know what, we changed our minds. So I had to buy a ticket and I booked my flight and I will be in Escondido by about 10 o'clock tonight. So I'm going home this weekend because it's John's birthday tomorrow. My parents are going to celebrate by taking all of John's friends out to dinner. We're going to go get a lobster dinner at probably like something classy like Red Lobster because John had never had lobster before, and when he was in the hospital and he couldn't eat, my dad promised him that he would take him out to a lobster dinner and treat him, and he never got to have his lobster dinner. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna party. In celebration of his birthday, I decided to make a special video raising awareness about bone marrow transplants and graft versus host disease. Not a lot of people know about either of those, especially GvHD. Actually, most of you didn't even know that that is what killed John, which is upsetting. But, you know, you can't force everyone to care, so instead I will just give you 4 minutes of just information to help you understand. John had to receive a bone marrow transplant because after a year or so of chemotherapy, it stopped working, it stopped breaking away at his tumor, and so cancer would have killed him if he didn't get a bone marrow transplant. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about GvHD. Essentially what graft versus host disease is, occurs when healthy bone marrow from the donor, which is immunocapable, which means it has immune cells, launches an attack on the recipient, which would be John, and it would recognize him as foreign, even though Courtney and him had matching marrow. They're 2 different people. There are parts of it that didn't match, and so recognized it as foreign, and it started to attack John's organs. Since John and other people who get GvHD are immunocompromised, which means they don't have an immune system, they can't fight against the immune cells that are attacking them. This leads to degradation of organs and tissues, and the body just has no defenses. There are 2 different types of graft versus host. There's acute and there's chronic, and the acute kind usually presents itself within the first 100 days post-transplant, and that one is usually associated with higher mortality. There's chronic GvHD, which occurs post 100 days after transplant. Puts chronic wear on the organs and tissues that it's attacking and leads to long-term problems. In John's case, he got graft versus host 3 times. He got it twice in the GI tract and 1 last time in the lungs. This disease is more deadly than people realize. So I might wind up regretting this, but I'm going to read you an excerpt from the bone marrow transplant experience that I wrote. I just wanted to share kind of what it's like firsthand to maybe help create a sense that this is really real. So this is on July 11th, 2009, 2 days before the bone marrow transplant. It didn't take but 5 minutes for the Benadryl the nurse gave him to kick in and steal him away as he handed me his controller and closed his eyes. It was chemo time. John hates that word, chemo. He avoids it at all costs. As John curled underneath the blankets, I turned the game system off and climbed into the bed chair next to him. The nurse set up an arsenal of bags, armed and ready to pump through my brother's veins. The chemo bag was the smallest of the 8 dangling bags, but by far the most potent. The treatment seemed to drag on for hours, and this was no surprise because it did drag on for hours. The chemo was so heavily concentrated that they had to only put it in him at a rate that took 4 hours, all the while being constantly flushed out by sodium chloride this and potassium chloride that. John got up to pee every 20 minutes. Every time he got up, I got up, and when the nurse asked if he needed anything, he replied with less trips to the bathroom. With every trip to the bathroom, I had a job. The machine that pumps the chemo into John, it is hooked up to his chest. Wherever he goes, the machine goes. When he pulled the machine into the bathroom with him, he couldn't shut the door because the machine was so big. So I would pull myself from nap to nap and hop up to open the door before he got to it and close it for him. He normally tried to close it after he was done, but rarely succeeded. His tired eyes failed to care as he crawled under his blankets, shivering. After the chemo, they continued the fluids and gave him medication to pee more frequently. Then they gave him his mouth care, which wound up all over the floor, as the vomit came faster than he could grab his bucket. The nurse dashed for the trash can, my mom grabbed for the bucket, I tried not to look from over my book, and my dad got up and sat next to John on his bed. They gave John Advent for his nausea, and he climbed back into bed with new sheets. My dad left to pick up Courtney from the train station, and my mom went downstairs. On another bathroom trip, John sat up and looked at me. "That wasn't as bad as I thought it would be," he said. "The chemo?" I asked. He nodded his head, avoiding that word again. I put down my book and crawled into bed next to him, stroking his arm until the PCA came to do vitals. A momentary pause. Then I would stroke his arm again. "I'll see you tomorrow, Nellie."